Once a poster boy for Overwatch, Genji has fallen from grace. These days, people just spam nerf Genji as an ongoing gag seemingly about the devs never loving Genji these days and never allowing him to actually be meta. You see, on release, Genji was automatically a fan favorite. I mean, Cyborg Ninja, who wouldn't love that automatically? And he was also very high skill ceiling, and he was a ranked stomper, meaning that if you knew how to play this character and you were good at him, you could single-handedly take over a lobby. Now, this most likely eventually came back to bite Genji purely because he was also a Smurf stomper, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Now, quickly after launch, Genji was revealed to be a very strong character, a character that was perfectly capable of carrying pros in a pro meta and ranked games alike. He had a mini reign of terror for a while, but you do gotta understand that the average skill level of Genjis at this time was nowhere near what they would eventually become, so Genji was held back just due to the community's skill level, not necessarily his power level. And if you took a Genji skill today, they would probably warp the entire landscape of Genji back then, because it took a while for people to truly adapt to this character. The skill ceiling was not even close to being hit back towards launch for many years. Now, Genji had a lot of neat tricks at launch. He had this super jump tech that he could use to fly across the battlefield, but it was patched out rather quickly, and he had a really powerful suite of abilities that were a lot different than they were today. We all know that Genji could double jump, but the first iteration allowed Genji to get a reset on his jump if he wall climbed, making it so he had infinite variations as far as how he would take a duel. And this flexibility and creativity in Genji's kit, plus the increase in his power level, was very sad to see go for a lot of Genji mains. Now, in addition to that, there was a combo on Genji where you could actually cancel your quick melee with a dash. So if you were close to a target, you could right-click melee dash 180 right-click melee and just like insta-kill people really quickly. And it would look like one continuous animation that was honestly probably a bit too strong, but still a lot of people like this as well, especially the people that spent all the time learning how to consistently 180. And at the time, that was a lot less common than it was now, so not many Genjis actually could pull off this combo. Now, last up, the Dragon Blade got reduced from 8 to 6 seconds because if you look at old Dragon Blades, they lasted forever, and this was probably a justified change. Now, in the immediate era after these changes, Genji was still very meta and very strong in both pro and ranked play, and this continued even and especially after Ana was released July 19, 2016. With the addition of Nano Blade, Genji was a linchpin combo with Ana in ranked, and in pro play, we saw a lot of Nano Blades seeing play, and it was really cool to watch and cool to see. I would consider the time period after Ana's release the golden age of Dive and the golden age of Genji, where Genji saw a ton of play, typically alongside Winston and Tracer and D.Va as a combo of sorts. But Genji was definitely a character that had a lot of skill expression, the capability to carry, and Genji got a lot of the limelight. We saw a huge rise in Genji players. Genji pros and streamers became well known throughout the community, like Shadowburn, Who Are You, Seagull, and Shadow2K. And players were still developing their skill set collectively at the character, with the community being blown away by Arcado's Ghost Dash tech, which today just seems kind of common for Genji, but at the time, it blew up and got over 1 million views. And we saw other interesting techs like wall climbing slightly to cancel your deflect so you can go back to dealing damage after using it, back when deflect wasn't something that you could cancel automatically. Now, things started to shift for Genji right around September 19, 2017, which was the Moth meta, where Mercy became one of the strongest things to do, and as such, we saw a ton of Sniper and Tracer. Genji still saw some pro play, but was mainly pushed to the side, mainly due to the power level of Mercy and the characters that she enabled, but Genji was still very powerful and ranked. Move along, though, to November 16, 2017, and Moira came out, which was a character that all of a sudden could punish Genji's poor mistakes, and it forced Genjis to improve not only their engagements, but just overall. And while this character was a character that definitely hurt Genji's viability a little bit in ranked until Genji's adapted, March 20th, 2018 is where Brig was released, and this was honestly the beginning of the end for Genji. Not only did Brig just hard counter dive, but Genji also was very ineffective against Brig directly, the things that Brig could do to peel for her teammates, and rally as a whole concept could oftentimes completely shut down a Genji. Not to mention the additional amount of crowd control made it very hard for Genjis to pull off effective blades, especially when they went into Brig's effective range. Now this all kind of spearheaded around Goat's meta, which was a 3 tank 3 support composition that I covered in a previous video, and that was a composition that had no place for Genji, nor could Genji do anything against. Enemies that went to this composition, a composition based around large amounts of healing and giant health pools, just had no place for Genji's burst-esque assassin playstyle when there wasn't any characters isolated that Genji could take advantage of, and most of the time a Genji would be completely useless up against this composition, meaning Genji saw no pro play, and Genji also was very weak in ranked if you so happened to go up against Goats every once in a while. Now March 19th, 2020 was the release of Baptiste, bringing along his powerful immortality field, another ability that was very good at shutting down Genji's blades, and at the time it was another obstacle for Genji to overcome in ranked. This leads us directly into some metas where Genji just doesn't belong. Double shield meta centered around Sigma and Orisa had 2 shields in front of the team permanently and no place for Genji to have any impact. His neutral game, which was his poke and assassin playstyle, basically got no value up against double shield, with no opportunity and no value from poking relative to other characters. This would often push Genji into a blade bot status where if you were playing Genji, you were doing it solely for the nano blade combo, but with Genji's inability to farm blade very consistently, especially into double shield, Genji just became a character that didn't make any sense to play, and the meta all but pushed him completely out. I do want to make it clear that this entire time Genji could still see ample play in the metal ranks in Overwatch, primarily due to the fact that Genji was such a high skill cap character that if you had the skill set to play him, you could still punish enemies' rampant mistakes and get value on Genji. However, the overall power level or the objective power level of this character relative to what he used to be was falling quickly, especially in the high tiers of play where Genji seemingly should be shining for a character with such a high skill cap, but even the best Genjis in the world weren't able to find value up against the inherent value that a lot of these characters and metas that were being created. Now, after a long enough time of Genji being very poor in the meta, Blizzard decided to take action for a very, very tiny window of time. From the 16th to the 30th of June 2020, increase shuriken damage from 28 to 30 and decrease spread from 12 to 9. In addition to that, the 1.5 second deflect went to 2 seconds and it could now be manually cancelled. This Genji was a god. All of a sudden, from a C tier pick at the high ranks of play to a triple S tier, Genji became incredibly powerful up against anything that rank could throw at you. Specifically because a Genji now did so much damage that even a character behind double shield had the potential to get one shot to a Genji dashing in, dealing some damage, killing them and dashing out, or comboing off any damage that their team put into them. This made Genji completely busted and over the breaking point, where Blizzard had to instantly revert the damage back to 28 because it was just too powerful. And I think that this really marks a key point in Genji where Blizzard all of a sudden became afraid of making Genji too powerful. Seemingly small buffs on this character could be the line between this character being completely unplayable to this character being completely dominant in a high-ranked meta just on a whim, and I think that made Blizzard extra cautious around Genji's balance going forward, seemingly because this Genji could be buffed to being the most powerful thing in the game with just a small tweak to some damage numbers. Now, towards the end of Overwatch 1, he was buffed back to 29 damage, but his Dragon Blade was also nerfed from 120 damage per slash to 110 damage per slash, and Genji was just fine, but not really that great overall in the pro meta. Now, fast forward to Overwatch 2's release, and Genji is once again one of the best DPS. Because of the lack of crowd control that was removed and the change to 5v5 nature, plus the addition of the very important passive where Genji got an increase in reload time and movement speed, Genji overperformed according to Blizzard's ideals. Specifically, that movement speed passive after a kill was very, very important for Genji and a passive that helped him most likely more than any other DPS. Because of his high pick and win rate, they nerfed his 29 damage to 27 per shuriken, and they reduced his magazine size from 30 to 24, making this character much weaker than he was before. Now, unfortunately for Genji, he got kicked while he was already down because the movement speed increase after getting kill passive on DPS got removed. This is the passive that most directly benefited Genji and was most likely one of the primary reasons why Genji performed so highly at the start of Overwatch 2. So not only did he lose that passive, but he also got that huge nerf slapped on top of him, and thus the Nerf Genji meme was born, where players like to echo the fact that Blizzard seemingly wants to kick Genji while he's down, and relative to other characters that seemingly get an ample time to be meta, Genji will never get the limelight, or at least Blizzard seems like they will never let Genji have the limelight for longer than like a week or two. Now this leads us directly to today, where Blizzard claims that the hero has a 50% win rate across the multitude of ranks, and that's enough to keep him as is. Now while this might make sense in theory, this lays out a fundamental problem, and it's that in high ranks, Genji just doesn't cut it. In a lot of the high ranks of play, he's one of the weakest DPS, and in pro play, he just doesn't see it. And this is primarily because he's too easy to counter and too reliant on the enemy team composition to be playable at all. Now, this is a really sad fate for such a high skill capped hero, a hero that you would like to see shine in high ranks of play in the pro meta, and perhaps not see as much play as players aren't good enough to reach his true potential in the lower ranks. Perhaps his powerful ult and weak neutral game is to blame for this predicament, or maybe it's his synergy with his ult and nano that is causing such a high win rate in the low ranks of play, a combo that is relatively easy to learn and use at this point. For now, it doesn't seem like Genji will be meta anytime soon, but that doesn't mean he's unplayable. For the majority of ranks, Genji still gives you a ton of skill expression to outplay your opponents, and this is alone enough to make Genji a capable character to climb you to Grandmaster with. Now the last thing is to pass the question off to you. Do you think Genji is fine in his current state? Do you think Blizzard has something directly against Genji at this point, or are they scared of overbalancing him? Let me know in the comments down below.